okay to do a second one on your book? Are you?
Yeah, Pierre, you're so natural. I could listen to your voice all day because your book was absolutely incredible. I know, rambling on here, but I have to say that what's really interesting is that, I had the idea of that in 1996. It came smart. It just happened with the Greys. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean so right. And I think I've been looking and searching like all of us. But certainly now, what's happened is that I've been, I've got a book here called what's it called, by Michael Cremo, and the Vedic devolution of man, or something. And so I've been starting to look into the antediluvian cultures, and I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing, because we've been lied to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have been lied to. And
You're working on a new book. Sorry, are you working on a new book now?
yeah, I'm working on a book called The Invisible Kingdom. It's about folklore, but I'm tying together this.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm kind of tying together what's the scatological tradition. The scatological tradition is the study of angelic boats or ships within the religious and mythological tradition. And what I'm finding is that the folklore also have these connections with ships. I think what's very interesting about folklore is that, as with the religious tradition, it's been sabotaged by the disciparati. These are the deceivers, or the priesthood, which have taken symbols, occult symbols, and they've imprinted them upon folklore. So often you're finding within these very eccentric cases of, let's say, individuals who are said to have been spirited away by the fairy folk, that you're seeing these symbols and signifiers which belong to the priesthood. And this is a type of, well, it's known as ideoglossia, which is this private discourse. And so they communicate in symbols. And so this is something which is very fascinating. It goes back into ancient Egypt. It goes back into English folklore. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment. Yeah. So I think we're going to now look at You, the Public Deceived, the Grand UFO Deception. I've finished reading this today. So I read your first book, A Passage Through Eternity, probably about 6 months ago, because I saw you at a conference. I think it was in Pontefract, I think.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's it. And you craftily put a copy of your book in my bag.
I did, yes. Unfortunately, we didn't get to...
no, and I was stumped, and I kept thinking, who... And I was so honoured, and it was amazing. So thank you very much.
I saw you at the conference, and I really wanted to talk to you, but it never kind of just happened. But I watched your lecture, and I was very interested in what you had to say, because I felt that you were a very eloquent speaker, very intelligent, and I felt that you really gave ufology a degree of credibility. And this is what this subject really needs, because there's a lot of ideas which are sort of floating around, and there's a lot of disinformation. But what I liked about you was your honesty and your integrity. So for me, it was a revelation, because I was compelled by what you were saying. I really believed what you were saying, and I felt it was very interesting how you was drawing in these different strands in terms of consciousness, in terms of the spiritual element, and also drawing it together with the physical element. And that's something which I'd been very interested in, and that I'd explored within my book, Holographic Culture. So to summarize your book, You, the Public Have Been Deceived, it's basically a summary of quite a lot of famous UFO cases, but intersecting those are some less known cases as well. So you've got the very famous cases and a few lesser known cases. And I think what's interesting about your book is that you come with this knowledge and this experience. It's experiential in terms of you writing about this subject and this phenomenon. And so you have a degree of insight, which I found that a lot of researchers often don't, in terms of researchers who are almost looking at the subject blindly from outside. And so for me, that was very interesting. Now, why was you interested in approaching some of the older cases and going back and looking at this? Was it because you felt that there was material there that many researchers had overlooked, and that you wanted to go into this in more detail?
I think from a personal point of view, I mean, the Betty and Barney Hill case is one that I remembered. I remembered buying the book by John G. Fuller called Interrupted Journey. And I remembered as a young lad, very young, reading that and being absolutely amazed. And you know, life has this irony of synchronicities, and we go back into the spiritual aspect again, where you feel, or most of us feel, as though we are guided, where you find yourself linking with the most amazing situations and people. And I think that I wanted to illustrate those cases, especially with the Betty and Barney Hill case, which, by the way, Kathleen Marden, a brilliant author, researcher, and investigator, has been in touch and has been very kind to my brother and myself, giving us material and helping also with regards to it. Because I was a bit fed up with people taking the mickey out of these cases, and I know that I wanted to bring a new, slightly different approach to it. For instance, with the Betty and Barney Hill UFO case, one of the cases in there, you know, Dr. Carl Sagan came out and tried to debunk it. And my argument is, why would you get someone take all the trouble to do that, to disprove something, when in those days most people were just going about their business? But he was absolutely adamant to debunk Margie Fisher's creation of the star map, which Betty Hill had been shown by the leader on the craft. The other cases in there, I really enjoyed putting together. Some dubious characters who sadly are no longer with us, God love them, and just making the parallels between how the ufological system has morphed, has changed. Because I think that when Roswell occurred, the most famous, the holy grail of all UFO reports ever, and I think 99.9% of the general public, or those interested in ufology, know that something other than a mogul weather balloon crashed there. That was the birthing of disinformation. And then what was interesting, Pierre, was that all of a sudden, you know, in the 1950s, all these shady characters were wheeled out, talking about our beautiful space brothers that were never seen.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you know, and then I think what happened was that there was a tremendous effort by both the media and the military establishment to squash any suggestion that UFOs and their so-called occupants weren't friendly, lovely people, not all of them anyway. I'm not saying that we don't have them, I'm sure they're there. But the greys, or the ones that have been seen in the craft, would shock anyone if they'd seen them. And going into the research of the Roswell case clearly demonstrates this through some of the witnesses in there. So I wanted to build some cases, some old and some new, and some incredible cases as well, with Earl Anderson, who works for MUFON, is a wonderful guy, and of course about his mother, who had tremendous connections with regards to the military, and of course being the secretary, one of the secretaries to the billionaire Howard Hughes, and what she'd been involved in to a degree. So I wanted to show people that although we look at it like from case to case, if you're looking at it in a slightly different way and you understand who and what these people are, it shows you the not too deep in this book, because that's going to come in my forthcoming book that I'm going to be working on, called Visitors from the Void.
Could you just repeat that final point, because you just broke up there and we just lost this? So what's something that you really want to look into in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I wanted to look more into the cover-up, i.e. the secret military industrial complex, and also I'm going to be outlining this in a new book called Visitors from the Void. I've got so many titles in my head. Visitors from the Void, which is going to be the new UFO book after I've finished another one that I'm working on at the moment. So I wanted to give parallels to the different case studies and kind of like try and knit it all together. But it's interesting how some cases, like the Pascagoula UFO encounter with Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson back in 1973, the entities there were very different. I'm sure that most people that look into the Pascagoula UFO experience will find that the robots that came, they were robots. They were like, you know, these elephant-skinned robot type things. And of course, within the annals of ufology, we'd never heard of them before. We'd never seen them again. So this also leads to a very strong psychic connection, as though the phenomena seems to morph into what it wants you to see.
Yeah.
For instance, Kelvin Parker and Charles Hickson were fishing, and the robots had what they thought were pincers for claws, you know? So it's just weird how they try to morph into the environment.
Yes, and I think that this is to do with language, because this is something that I'm going to be
Yes.
looking at within my new book. I think what they do is that they intercept the linguistic areas of the brain in order to, so they imprint linguistically a command, but the command is anomalous to what one is experiencing. And so what they're doing is through language, they're intercepting the memory, and then they reinforce a new memory or imprint a new memory through language. So you've got this, if you like, dichotomy between the subconscious mind, which is remembering everything and is image-based, and then you've got the linguistic centers of the brain, which is directly tied into the conscious mind, and they're intercepting the conscious mind through language. And I think it's very interesting. I think you said in your own case that when you saw a strange light, suddenly it popped into your head that it was the porch light. And this is occurring in numerous cases. It's almost like a command, and the command is there for you to remember something very specific. But I think what's very interesting is also how there's an interface with the consciousness that it almost latches onto your mind, and it can read your mind instantaneously and adapt. And so we're here dealing with a very adaptive consciousness. I think in terms of the Pascagoula case, I think what's very interesting is that the word gula is a female jinn within the Arabic, and it's very similar to the Devil's Den case as well, where you're seeing that often there is a name which is very significant within folklore, and then it's manifesting now in terms of what we would describe as aliens, but what then would have been described in terms of folklore. So I think that that's very interesting. Now, there also seems to be a strong symbolic element to this, and you've alluded to this yourself in terms of that it tries to impress upon your mind what it wants you to see. And often when people remember what they think that they've seen, there seems to be a symbolic component. I'm interested in terms of your own experience. Have you had elements in terms of what you've remembered that you felt, well, was this symbolic? How did this relate? Because there was certainly, when you were on one of the ships, you spoke about in your book about a tree. And I thought that this was very interesting.
Yes. Now, this was something that the original publishers, when I brought this story out, it was called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena. That had been published by Capleban, I believe, in 2009. The publisher wanted to keep most of that out, especially about the probing part, and especially about the tree, because he felt that people wouldn't be able to relate to it. Well, I went along with it because I had no choice, really. But in the future books, when I had a bit more control, I did it. Now, the tree, when I came to the wall and the grey, going back to the abduction I had back in 1989, and they had finished doing what they did with me, and I was ordered to dress and follow this grey to the wall, and the wall opened, and there was the outside it was early morning, and I could see another craft below me. But before that, this image had come into my head, and it was of this tree, this huge, enormous tree. And, you know, if you went on television and you told them, oh, I saw a tree, well, they did laugh me all the way to the leads anyway, but not on all the programs, but one of them that really ruined my whole reputation, thanks to the media. But this tree was incredible because there was something deeply rooted, and they always say, don't they, it's those things that you don't really look at that has more of the answers to them. It felt old. It felt as though we were talking, or they were trying to describe growth. I have no idea, because no language, verbal language, had been presented to me in terms of me understanding it. It was more of a feeling or a knowing. I
do have an opinion on that, which I can share with you. In the Greek tradition, the word scaph, which is a type of boat or a smaller boat, comes from the verb scapto, which is to dig out or to hollow out. And so trees were connected often to oracle shrines. In terms of that, they were used to signify these angelic boats or vessels. Now, you also find this within the Japanese traditions as well, of the Utsu no Fune, which is, in today's parlance, a flying saucer. Now, the word Utsu no Fune is translated as a hollow boat, and they're traditionally in Edo prints represented as a flying saucer. But it's a polymorphic symbol because Utsu no Fune also means a hollow tree, and therefore within the Shinto shrines, hollow trees are used to demarcate the parameters of the temples because they represent these circular vessels which are connected to entities and deities. So that goes back into occult symbolism. And you also mentioned that I think that this was a different occasion in which you saw an old bottle. And I'd like you to tell that story because I've got a take on that as well if you're interested.
Of course, absolutely. Well, I totally agree with you. And of course, this research, this incredible, amazing research that you and many other researchers are doing, and myself as well, is leading us into areas, and certainly with me, into the past. And I think that most of the answers will be found in the past. I think we're chasing these physical objects when actually they elude us. Now, I had a vision that is also in the new book, You, the Public Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception, which Philip Mantle is bringing out from Flying Disc Press later this year. And it's already set to go on Kindle and paperback. But the vision was very powerful. I had two of them, and they came at separate occasions where I was standing by a window that was open, and it was very real, and I could see a UFO clearly. And in this vision, I will call it a vision because it's more than a dream, I could sense and feel this fascination for it, this real wonder, like, oh, they are there. It's a different type of feeling you get from like when you get a present that you really want. This was like, I really want that. I really want to know what that is. And it's there. And the craft would I would find it starting to come closer towards me. And I'm thinking, here it comes, I'm going to have it. It's, the holy grail of ufology. I'm going to have the answers because it's close to my heart, about the soul and about the afterlife and about those, them, all of it. And as it gets nearer, it becomes smaller. And then one of the UFOs in the first vision, I can't remember which way round they were, it doesn't matter, turned into an old bottle, a dirty old bottle.
Right.
And in the second vision, it was like a piece of lead piping, exactly the same, but it turned, so I was holding a piece of rubbish. So so I battled over the symbology of this, and I couldn't, and I thought, I've got to put that in the book because someone somewhere, some really clever person might be able to put those pieces together for me.
Well, I've got a take on this. The etymology for bottle comes from the word boat. So again, as with the hollow tree, it's a signifier of boat. Now, the term, the word pipe is also coming from the word to peep, which is to chirp or is a high-pitched beeping noise. So if you combine the two together, you have a boat which is making a chirping or a high-pitched beeping noise, which again seems to be... And again, I think that this is interesting because how are we dealing here with a symbolic language, or are we dealing with residual memories in terms of how the subconscious is remembering and in terms of how that's being played out and being used in terms of language, whether it's a manipulation or whether it's being put into your mind in order to impress a point subconsciously? I think these are interesting questions.
Yeah, I think that most of it is symbolic because they don't exactly spell it out to you.
No.
Certainly with the tree, when I had been on board that ship, that craft, and with regards to the stone circles, the reoccurring dream with them. And I know there was a guy that tried to do regression on me, but he couldn't, and I stopped because I thought I can't have this because I can't be opening my mind to just anything. I need someone to really know how to do it.
Sure.
And then, of course, the lead piping, the old lead piping, the old pipe in the bottle. So their language is, and it's almost like I kept thinking, especially with the images that I had with regards to the Greys being cloned entities and they're interested in our form of reproduction and what they are. And all of it was symbolic, every single part of it, bar from obviously the physical and non-physical experiences that occurred,
Yeah.
but I still thought they were physical to a degree on an etheric level, because when you're brought into their vibration, when they draw the real part of you into their domain, you are matched by their frequency, and therefore they can interact with you. And because you're still connected to the physical body, whatever they do to the etheric will still affect the physical counterpart.
Sure.
So I do feel that it's like trying to work out a complex puzzle, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think that this is interesting in terms of downloads of information. Do you want to, because in your book you mentioned that you felt that you had a download of information. Yeah. I know in terms of when I started writing The Murder of Reality, I had what I would describe as a vision of a vortex, and I always felt that this was telling me that I would be given knowledge or information, and I now know through my research that the vortex is often used to describe the Ruach Elohim, or the high spirits, which are connected to the Ophanim wheels, which we would describe in today's parlance as a flying saucer. So I'm kind of interested in your perspective in terms of what you felt that they taught you, and I'm kind of interested in terms of, do you feel that they gave you this, or is it that because that they're telepathic, that there's a degree of psychic mirroring going on, and you're almost stealing or taking some of these, stealing might be the wrong word, but you're almost resonating at the same oscillation, and therefore you are able to extract elements in terms of what they know? How do you view this exactly?
Well, in answer to that, I believe that when the abduction occurred in 1989, it was 1996 that I had what I would assume people would call a download. It is the most incredible experience. It's almost as if your mind has opened and the answer is there. I've been battling since 1989 to work out what these greys were, because it had so impressed upon my life, and the embarrassment and the ridicule I had gone through. There was a lot of kind people, and I have to thank them for that. But with regards to the media, I was so and so straightforward that I didn't realize that I'd landed in the lap of complete ridicule, and then I learned how the media machine worked. So I kept thinking about the abduction. How did the Greys do it? How did they do it? How? What are they? Where do they come from? Why are they here? And I remembered I was at work, and I kept thinking and kept thinking and kept thinking and thinking for years and years. And all of a sudden, it was as though my mind had opened, and the answer was there. The Greys are cloned entities, or some form of clone. Some of them, not all of them. They have a spark of divine consciousness, but not enough to get them back into the laws of creation, because through cloning they've robbed themselves of the right to be part of creation. They have found us as a species that can reproduce, and they're interested in the hybridization program. Soul, memory, experience, love, taste, smell, these aging, these things they don't have. So I remembered there was more to it than that, and I do not lie, and I will not lie. I stick firmly with my facts. There was some more to it that I can't really recall. But I remembered I went home and I wrote the whole thing out. And at that time, there was a magazine called Alien Encounters, quite a big magazine. And I submitted it to them. And they accepted it, and they called it revolutionary. I was so proud within its speculation. And it was theoretical. It doesn't prove anything. It was just a small part of a tiny piece to the puzzle. But I felt, in terms of your next question, it's very, very interesting. I don't think that the Greys would have given me that myself personally. I could be wrong, but I agree. That made me smile when you said, hijacking the information, like I'd hot wired into their system.
That's right.
And that's quite amazing, and I believe that's what happened, because a part of my mind had been asking and asking, and then it just opened to that portion.
Yeah, because I believe that in your first book you talked about how your brother went into a trance, and then you had an entity which seemed to be mirroring him in some way, and I think that this is what's happening, that you get psychic mirroring with these entities. So they go into your mind, but they're also vulnerable as well, and this is why sort of within, let's say, the traditions of blessing, so a person may use a crucifix or a blessing. Now the word blessing Bledsian comes from the word to bleed, and again, crucifixion is a death image, and through the psychic mirroring, it can seriously compromise the entity. So when they try to hijack the mind, they're also vulnerable. They're vulnerable to this psychic type of mirroring. And so that's why I asked the question, because I thought that you had somehow co-opted or somehow appropriated this information, and I was interested in your perspective on that. So I also found a very interesting part in your book when you were talking about aliens creating mental stimuli in terms of putting ideas of the apocalypse into people's minds and stimulating fear or arousal or various different emotions or memories. Now, do you feel that they're trying to, are they putting this into some kind of database? Are they doing this much more at a soul level in terms of that they're trying to almost steal a person's memories, which are connected to a person's soul? It's almost like that the soul pattern is made up of all these various memories, and they're almost like trying to take a piece of a person's soul away. How do you view that?
Well, I agree with you. They're a blank canvas for experience. They have no soul, as it were, to it. No soul. And it's almost as if they really need something from us. They're very interested in creation. They're interested in reproduction. They're interested in how we function as human stroke spiritual beings. I believe that what they're doing is that they are invoking a reaction, because the only way to get a reaction from someone is to do something to them or show them something.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, if you see something yourself that's quite extraordinary and very different or upsetting, it will generate these emotions for you. And maybe they feed from that, maybe they learn from that. But I believe that they are accumulating these experiences, emotional experiences, for their own means. Now, I know that there are negative forces that seemingly operate on a very higher level of conscious awareness, evil entities that have hijacked this world. I'm not going to go too far into areas where it may seem a little uncomfortable, but we have to be realistic about this. There is a war going on, a spiritual war, and has been, and I believe that one of the things that really interests me is the fact that man has done his damnedest in the academic world, or the official version of the academic world, done its best to discredit and destroy the past, so that we cannot find our true links to what we are, our heritage. And there seems to be another, higher establishment of power that seems to be governing through fear. Now, if you look at the world that we live in fear. We've got this terrible pandemic at the moment. Control is maximized. It just seems to me that every time that we as human beings begin to find our place, begin to look outside or think outside the box, start to become more spiritual, something comes along and pushes it right down. So I believe that such entities like, it isn't just the greys, but they want a reaction. They may feed from it, they may need it, or I believe it's possible that they require them for something, because they cannot feel. They don't have the same emotional links that we have. So maybe they're trying to fill in a blank canvas. Maybe they're trying to fill in the holes to something they're not, and we are their program. I have speculated as well that perhaps they are creating a new genus, that the human experiment has failed, that we are ostensibly, sorry folks, but we've got to look at it, that we're doomed, because we're just going around in circles. There doesn't seem to be any development for us other than extinction, and that a new species has been created. We just don't know.
Within the biblical tradition, didn't we, with the floods, in terms of Elohim?
Absolutely.
They just started again.
Yes. Absolutely.
I think that they are very interested in evolutionary cycles.
Yes.
They're interested in emergent systems. The currency of the universe seems to be knowledge, and this is what they're interested in. Again, my feeling on this is that we're dealing here with a predaceous species. I think in general, when you look at evolutionary cycles and in terms of sentient beings, that generally speaking, most beings move towards equilibrium, but you do get extremes. You get the predaceous type, and then you get the very spiritual type. On both sides of the shall we say, the boundaries, that they're quite rare because things move towards balance and equilibrium. But the thing with predaceous species, and particularly the ones that have evolved to be very intelligent, is that they are very controlling. And so therefore they do tend to conquer, and they are interested in exerting their control structures and their hierarchies. And certainly when you look at, say, for example, the Hermetical tradition, you see that the Hermetical tradition is always talking about how the deities that they imprinted or overlaid, it's almost like a mirror, that the governmental structures, and I'll use the word ship of state because the ship of state is very appropriate because it describes the angelic host. Malak, an angel, is a polymorphic word of Malak, a sailor. So the ship of state is a mirror image of heaven. And therefore we are working and operating under their, shall we say, legal system and their structure. Now, I also think that they're interested in societies evolving to a degree, but evolving within certain parameters, because they're interested, they know that human beings are creative, they know that we are extremely intelligent. Given the right opportunities and the right encouragement, we could go every far as what they could technologically and in any other way, because we are very remarkable beings, and they understand that, and they're trying to exploit that and trying to control that. So that's my perspective on these entities and on these beings. And I can imagine that within certain sectors of the UFO community, and again, I don't want to be too patronizing, because again, I think that we need to be coming from a position of consolidation, as you rightly say, that we all, we don't all have the right answers.
No.
But I can imagine that within certain sections of the ufological community, that some of your ideas might be controversial. Do people accept your ideas? Are they polite about it, or can some people be very rude? How have you found that within the ufological community?
Well, I think with any form of new ideas like yourself, you will know, Pierre, is that you will get attacked. And I think that, some people can't see it. The problem we have is that what's interesting is through my life journey, through your life journey, our life journeys are very special, and very guided. Now, what's interesting is that I was involved in UFOs, and that is my 100% top thing in research.
Yeah.
Then the psychic part comes along, and then the medium tells me that I'll make a connection between the psychic and UFO phenomenon, and I'm not sure what she was talking about. And so when you think about this, we've got to look on a larger scale, that it's not just about the physical nuts and bolts, the power that drives the crafts. It's about the deeper understanding of what we are dealing with. Sure. And I think because it so eludes us, we've also had disturbing cases which must be addressed. Not just cattle mutilation, but human mutilation. I'm not going to go into that here, but just to make you aware that, I think a lot of the people that are in power, the bad guys, as it were, the human bad guys, are intent in covering that up. And we hear a lot about this in the, dare I say it, the national parks, where people go missing under the most bizarre circumstances. But I have been attacked. But basically, I have a lot of people who really respect me. And as I say, I respect my peers. We also have we've created through Nigel Ross' New Force, the National UFO Reporting Service, which is designed to bring information right into the hands of us researchers, and not being hidden away like Project Blue Book and all that type of thing. And what's interesting is that I had written to someone in Parliament asking for their help, requesting for help, to see if we can get some kind of like scientific board together. Silence. So I have been attacked. But it's something I've learned to live with, and I do understand that if some people are in their comfort zone, I have to remember that years ago I was the same. Knowledge changes you. Knowledge leads the way. Knowledge opens the mind. And it's like something that used to happen to me when I used to belong to a UFO group. I go there at night and feel really excited, meet the people, listen to their cases, come back, and in the morning I'd be thinking, this isn't real, because I've been told that this world is real. And eventually the psyche part started to digest and understand that. So you know, and I know that we're all programmed from an early age, and to try and deconstruct that programming is very, very difficult. So there'll be some people who will not accept and will still embrace the old ideologies of what they've been taught as their truths. So it's very dangerous grounds that we walk on, but what is so liberating, what is so fascinating, is the fact that we're on the same page with regards to our understanding of what we could possibly be dealing with here. And it's not as simple as that. I've done talks and been attacked by some people, but I'm like, okay, I understand that. I get that. If you don't accept that, I'm not pushing this on anyone. We're just dealing with models, theoretical models. It's the only thing we do have, and they are important to research. So sure, it's going to be uncomfortable for some ufologists, researchers, or ordinary folk, bless them, because we're all on the same page in accepting new ideas. You see, so that's something I have to live with. But yes, I am attacked sometimes.
I mean, I think it's very interesting what you're saying. I think that what we need to do is, first of all, we need to get the academics on board, because for too long this has been discredited amongst the scientific community. And so we need to get a degree of credibility, and we need to do that through the academic institutions. Now, unfortunately, the academic institutions are the mediators of knowledge, and this is why they are so tightly controlled and regulated, because the powers that be do not want academia and scholarship to go anywhere near this subject. And therefore, again, for me, within my own research, it's always been very important for me to be academically rigorous, because when you're dealing with scaphology, which is the study of these angelic ships, boats, vessels within the religious and mythological tradition, when you begin to deconstruct the language, then you begin to realize that the religions and the mythologies, and in terms of the angelic emissaries who are often connected to ships and vessels, that this is not taught within religion, within mythology. But yet it's so integral to actually understanding the discipline. It's like this massive piece of the jigsaw is missing. And I think, therefore, if we can become more scientific, become more rigorous, and try and get on board more academics and give this subject a degree of credibility. Now, having said that, my Tai Chi master once said to me that I was too academic and that I just needed to focus on more important things, and that academia was just a very small part of something which is very much, shall we say, more wonderful, more manifest, more magnificent. And sometimes with our academic and theoretical constructs, that we can reduce the world and we make it smaller and smaller and smaller. And yet really what we're dealing with is something which is really magnificent. And we need to really try and sometimes to tune into that. And I think that that's what was very interesting about your book, is that you come across as a very spiritual individual, and that through your searching, and again, I feel that there are answers. I've always felt that there are answers. We're always told, and again, it's subliminal, it's UFO, it's unidentified. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think that these are unidentified. I believe that people know exactly what these are, and I do think that it is possible to understand this, to deconstruct it. So, and again, you can find answers within occult symbolism. When you begin to deconstruct the occult symbolism, when you go into folklore, when you go into religion and mythology, it's all there. And again, it's this vast tapestry of this phenomenon which is intersecting both at the physical level and also at the spiritual level. And again, you're seeing these ties and these connections within religion and mythology with astrotheological symbolism. You're seeing how it's playing out in terms of the earth and the mirror image between the heavens and earth. And so it's an absolutely fascinating subject. So I want to ask you now a question about what was your favourite case in your book, which you looked at in The Public Deceived, because you looked at a great cross-section of many different cases and you analysed them very critically, and you were very astute in many of your observations. So did you have a particular case which really stood out for you?
Well, there were three actually. I mean, well, there's all of them. I'll be killed if I didn't mention. But the three main ones was the Betty and Barney Hill case, of which I have a very strong passion towards. I don't know why, and and then there was the Pascagoula case. Paul Sinclair, the researcher in Bempton, best-selling author of the Truth Proof books. He's been great. But the one that really, I think, really chilled my bones was Earl Anderson and his mum.
Right.
And I don't know why, because he's involved he's a top UFO researcher from MUFON,
Mm.
and his mum was a very, very clever lady, had very powerful
Mm.
connections, and that she had carried secrets to her grave, which proved
Mm.
that there is an elite group of powerful people who are aware of not just the UFO phenomenon, but also psychic programs. And that is one case that really kind of like I couldn't get out of my head, because Earl had been so fantastic, and he's a good friend, and really, you could tell he was very at pains to, because his mum's passed over, and he really loved his ma, but that was one that really did stick in my head. And also, going back, Pierre, to talking about consciousness, and without detracting, I thought I'd say this very quickly before I forget.
Mm.
It certainly is connected with consciousness, because myself, Ronald, and a good friend of ours, Susan, had performed an experiment, a psychic experiment, many years ago at Rendlesham, and we had actually summoned a UFO, and that was documented, and that actually proved that these entities, these beings, whatever they are, this intelligence, this conscious awareness, wherever it is, interdimensionals, are aware of you.
Mm.
So like Paul Sinclair says, when you become aware of it, it becomes aware of you. And that's quite chilling.
Yeah,
Very chilling.
I totally agree. I do know, in terms of light phenomenon, that people who go out to try and experience and see light phenomenon, that they're much more likely to actually see this, because there does seem to be this psychic connection there. Do you have a take upon this plasma? Do you think that it's phasing in and out of reality, and sometimes it's physical and sometimes it's, shall we say, dematerialized? So, for example, when you mentioned in your book that you saw what looked like, it almost looked like a small little, I guess, a circular drone satellite which was watching you, and it was metallic and it was floating and it looked heavy. But then you also mentioned that one of your friends saw a plasma light form. Would you speculate that they were one and the same object, but that they were just at a different level of frequency?
Yes, absolutely correct. Because I agree with you, Pierre. Because it has to, this energy has to manifest into our reality and take a form that is basically, a physical form. Otherwise, it won't be able to stay within this dimensional frequency long enough. And I think they can come in and go out like you're putting something in your pocket and taking it back out again. That's why we see so many of them that just blink out so quickly. On films, you see some UFOs are there, and the next minute they're gone. So they're what I would call interdimensionals. I think that they're able to infiltrate our plane of reality and also connect with our psyche. This is a really uncanny part to all of this. There are the good guys and there are the bad guys. It's almost like, Dan Brown's Angels and Demons. And I believe that, while we are being protected by spirit guides, by angels, as we call them, there is the darker force that is working to its own ends. Now, I'm not religious in the sense of like holier than thou. I respect other people's faiths and beliefs, but we have to look on a more scientific approach to this, because this is what fascinates me. I think as a researcher, you wouldn't do it if you didn't love doing it. If there's a part of you that pulled you, as researchers like yourself, we get very little money, but we enjoy and we love doing what we do because we're after the truth. And I've always said before, whatever truth that form comes in, I will accept and embrace that. But to my mind, this intelligence is very clever. It's able to connect with you when you are at your most vulnerable. My brother's always said that they get you when you're vulnerable, when you're in bed. You've got pajamas on. It's not. We feel more protected when we're fully clothed. And throughout the day, it's like, do anything. So they get you when you're at your most vulnerabilist, or they can play with you or interact with you, and like a giant firefly that mesmerizes you, and you're caught within their spell. So the more I look into this, the more I research into this, the more I find that there isn't a very good outcome to most of them. That's not saying for all of them. So there is definitely an agenda, and I think they're aware of people like you and me and many other individuals that operate on different field frequencies or conscious field frequencies of awareness. It doesn't make us any better than anyone else. And that's something that someone said to me, well, it's because you think you're... And I said, no, I never have done. It's because we're utilizing this on a different level. The system's programmed us to use it. And because of that, maybe the system is aware of it.
Absolutely.
And that they are sending those other things in to come in and try and bring it down or change things. So it's a war, a psychic war.
You see, my understanding of this is that they, and again, I'm going to use my language as a human being because, again, we're dealing here perhaps metaphorically, but their ability to interact in terms of patterns within nature, I'm led to believe that they can read the thought patterns of an ant. And so when there are, let's say, little peaks and troughs within human consciousness, whether somebody is on the brink of discovering electromagnetic energy, which is somehow different, or that they're a great mathematician, a musician, or whether they're somehow at an energetic level different, or even maybe at a physiological level that they're different, they're interested. And I'm absolutely convinced that they're interested. And And they seem to be interacting as well. And so a lot of ufologists almost take this Star Trek idea that of the ninth directive, that basically these beings don't, shall we say, intervene within human history. Now, my understanding of this, from having read the biblical, the Islamic, the Hermetical, the Apocrypha, is that they intervene all the time. They're absolutely interested in human consciousness, and they're very interested in, actually, shall we say, pushing, directing, stirring human psychology. And I would go even a step further, and I would say that they're interested in stirring mass psychology. So we're finding this within our religious traditions, within folklore, within the philosophical tradition as well. And also when you look at inventors and how they've often interacted with entities. And this in itself is a whole history of research, which is only really threads and bits and pieces of it has been picked up within the ufological community. But there have been many famous people who have come up with ideas and inventions, and they've had these interactions with these, shall we say, other entities, these non-worldly entities, however you want to describe that. So I think that is very interesting, and I totally concur with what you're saying in terms of consciousness. It all goes back to consciousness. I want to just, if you're okay, just to stay for another 10 minutes. Are you okay? Because you must be. We've been now speaking for nearly 2 hours. I know with the case of the Devil's Den, I found what was very interesting was that after the incident, the individual that they remembered symbols. Have you ever had any symbols or writing which you've been able to remember or recall?
Yes, there was one time that we had done our research at Rendlesham. And remember, these other experiences I've had were not at Rendlesham. It's just that fate intervened and led us there. It's in the books. But we had camped out where we did our UFO experiments. And we put a blanket down. And we normally used to go off for a walk, you know, and have a coffee and a sandwich and come back when it got a little bit darker to the blanket that led out to the farmer's field where most of the sightings are seen. And on this particular occasion, someone had left a dead rat and a dead rabbit. And basically these two dead creatures being put in a circle on the blanket. They were fresh and they were nose to tail in a circle. Yeah. And it was a dead rat and a rabbit. And they were put in a circle. Now, it horrified us. And the first thing because Susan was with us again and my brother, we were horrified. This is some years ago now. We knew that we had to get out of there because, you know, someone was playing a sick joke with us. We hadn't seen anyone. And I'm not saying it was alien, but what I'm saying here is that afterwards we found out about animal mutilations, but someone would have had to have catch those creatures very quickly, and they were still warm, and we wanted to get out. So someone had told me once the symbolism between the rat and the rabbit. I hope I've got that right. I don't want someone to quote me because, you know, but it's in the book. I mean, I'm sure it was a rat and a rabbit. that had been put in a circle, and it was very disturbing.
Sure.
And I know that Susan had got hold of someone to check to see if it had any symbology behind it. I think it did come back. Someone had said something about this being something that's normal. But I didn't really pursue that in terms of symbology, because I was go off chasing UFOs. And, yeah. So I mean, if there are any others, I can't think at the moment. Probably the light bulb might drop. You know, you try and look back in 15 years of experience.
Did you have any downloads of writing or alien writing? Have you ever? Because I know that appears in quite a lot of cases, not all cases, but quite a lot of cases where people.
No, I don't think so. I tried deep trance channeling. I gave up with that. It didn't work. Clairvoyance works.
Yeah.
The healing doesn't. But in terms of the greys, I'm starting to perform a new experiment, a conscious experiment,
Right.
On a deep level of meditation. And I'm trying to understand the greys. I know I've had people, very loving people, saying, be careful. Well, I'm guarded anyway, and guided, but I just want to find out my own answers on a very strong psychic level, because, you know, I just want to understand. And I know that we may be dealing with forces that do not have our best interests at heart, but it's for my own interest to find out something that I need to know. The other symbolic thing was the stones in the circle that I kept having a reoccurring dream with, and the building, the broken building in the middle. And every time I had this reoccurring dream, I just couldn't find the right stone to get to unlock for me to go to the one in the middle. So I believe that was a screen memory. That something had happened to me at Bignell House when we were just my mother was a servant, one of the workers there. We had a lovely family that owned the mansion there. They looked after us. They were lovely people. And she recognised what I drew and said, well, that's I used to take you part of a ruin in the old property. Away from the mansion, obviously, because that was quite big. And it's still there, I believe, because originally from Oxford. There have been quite a few symbolisms, I should imagine, that I still haven't quite worked out, especially with the vision of the old bottle and the lead piping in the shape of UFOs. So I think a lot of people get that, but trying to interpret it, trying to understand it, it's very difficult.
And I agree with what you were saying, that with information, it's made available, but only at the correct time. And so I think this is another thing as well. I'm interested in terms of, do you feel that you're telepathic with your brother? I mean,
well, if we were, it's long dead. I mean, we do pick up on one another. My brother is an artist and an author himself, and he's very brilliant with computers and with art. His art is spectacular. Of course, he's done most of the illustrations to the books. But we do have an intuition. We seem to be able to know what the other one's thinking or feeling. It's not like spelt out to you, but that knowing creates a language which is something that when you start to work on it, it makes sense. So as with regards to twins, we've always had a very close link. He's my best mate, but my best buddy. We like the same films, the same books, the same music. We like the same interests, the same clothes, everything. It's really freaky, but it's cheap as well, because but I will tell you something that did happen, very funny, with both of us. When we were younger, the film Cocoon had come out, the beautiful film in 1985. The book, written by David Saperstein, best-selling author in America, New York Times best-selling author. We decided to buy each other a present. And we went out and we got the present, and the Christmas day we opened it. When I opened mine, I thought I'd open my own, because it was a book, the Cocoon book by David Saperstein, and he opened it. We both bought each other the same present.
Oh, wow. That's,
So I will tell you that we contacted David Saperstein, and he was a very kind man. He's still around, and he's still in touch with us nearly every couple of weeks, email. He's a brilliant man, an author, filmmaker, and all sorts, and he endorsed one of our science fiction novels. So David Saperstein helped to mentor us as well with our work, and he had nothing to do with the second film, Cocoon: The Return.
Right.
He hated that. Cocoon, with the director Ron Howard, he loved that. So but that was really bizarre how these people come in, and I'm sure you're the same, Pierre, where you find these incredible people that seem to connect with you, you know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's interesting in terms of because I'm an identical twin, and
Yeah.
I know that my mother, she said that we used to speak our own language, and
Yes.
well, first of all we were telepathic and we didn't speak. She just thought that we were telepathic, that we would communicate. We would kind of do things like we'd look at each other, and then one would help the other one climb out of the cot and things like this, which she found very intriguing. I think as we've grown older, because we were growing up in the 1970s and the 1980s, we got split up very early. In fact, when I was 6 years old, I was split up from my brother at school, and I don't think I was ever really in any of his classes throughout my schooling and college and university. So we were kind of split up. I think it's interesting because you've kind of done, it almost seems like reading your books that you've almost done everything with your brother, that you've worked together. You're tremendously artistic and creative individuals, and I find that's the same with me and my brother. I tried to be an artist for many years, and that didn't happen. And then but I'd always been interested in this subject because I'd seen a rocket in a field when I was a child, and so that had ignited my interest in flying saucers and everything, science fiction, and also in ghosts and the paranormal.
We had our own secret language. We made these sounds that depicted a certain personality to an individual. I'm not going to go into it, but it still makes us both laugh. We had an entire language of sounds. We could just make a sound.
Yeah.
And we knew,
Like tonality.
Yes, we both knew what we were saying. And we still laugh today, both of us. So he has been a very instrumental and a strong connection to me. I mean, most twins they live together, they work together, and some twins don't. It's just life. People say, oh, it's a bit odd you being together. And you think, well, no, actually, it's quite normal. I think that your life would be very strange to me.
Well, me and my brother, we're both writing books. So he's a poet, and he writes a lot of poetry about human rights. And he also he's very interested in translating. So he translates lots of different. Well, he uses Google Translate in order to try and get basic translations on poems. And then he goes, and he's very rigorous. So, for example, when he translated the Tao Te Ching, he read every single commentary on the Tao Te Ching, and then on every single Chinese character before he tried the translation on it. And so he seems to be very interested in language and translations. And then again, he did a translation of a Welsh poet as well. It escapes my mind now. But my brother's actually, he's written lots of books. He's a very prolific author. He's much more prolific than what I am as an author. And he writes all these books about poetry, human rights as well. And so he's very interesting. And I kind of do a lot of occult symbolism. But having said that, he's very interested in occult symbolism. He's interested in the tarot, and he's written a book which is unpublished on the symbolism of the tarot. And so it's kind of interesting because sometimes he'll say, what do you think about this symbol or that symbol? And he'll ask my opinion on something. But it's interesting because we think alike, so our personalities are quite different, but the way in which we think is very similar. And I think it's very similar to how my father actually thought. My father used to say to me, son, I don't think in straight lines, I think around corners. And I think that that's very much how I think. I think I'm quite a creative individual, and when I read your work, I instantly resonate with it because I'm creative. And certainly in your first book, which is more autobiographical, I always got this impression that you were both always very artistic, but always you'd bring out a new book and it'd go well and then it'd be thwarted. And I would almost feel a degree of empathy because I've been through that myself as a creative individual, putting on an exhibition and then people don't come to the exhibition and or writing something and not getting it published. And so I saw that very much within your work and your brother's work.
Well, Pierre, my whole life journey now tells me that I love people very much, and I'm very honest, maybe too honest, and I'll never change. But the memories and experiences. Life is important, and I believe and I know that there is a continuation of consciousness. I believe in good. I believe in wonder, creation. And I think it's important for people like us, yourself as well, and many others, to research into these other areas that many others will say, well, they're forbidden. No, they're not forbidden. God gave us a mind, created a brain for us to use. You're not going to stagnate that now, are you? It's like having a new computer with an extended memory. It doesn't mean to say you can't use it. So I've got this passion, this drive for people, for art, for culture, for knowledge, for truth. And that's something like you I've always been after. And we have been knocked down by people who are not truth. But then I think that we can, you just pick yourself up and carry yourself forward and carry on with your theoretical ideas, your theoretical models of debate, which is important. But I am humbled and honoured to know a great many wonderful people. Philip Mantle, the British ufologist. I read his books when I was younger. And he always says to me, always make me sound like he's so old.
And he's done so much for British ufology as well.
Yes. Like such a
books which he's published, and the amount of information he's got out there. Yeah, he's also one of my friends, and I really appreciate his friendship.
And Chris Evers as well, Wella Magazine. So I've had these, and my friends from abroad, from America, incredible network of people that connect all of us together. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I would just to finish on the points in terms of what you've been saying. I mean, I think in terms of the human race, certainly within the education system, that for most people they're told within the education system that they're average or below average, but in actual fact, every individual is walking around with a supercomputer in their head. They're all geniuses. And the problem is that most individuals don't know how to exploit that intelligence, that raw intelligence in terms of being able to line themselves up with this wonderful universe, with this force. And I think meditation can certainly help, and Tai Chi and spiritual practices. But I also think that people just need that confidence, that if they have that confidence within themselves, then wonderful things can happen. I believe that we're capable of so much, but throughout human history, and you touched upon this in our first interview, when you talked about that there is this amnesia in terms of human culture, in terms of learning. Every time we've got to a stage within human development where we've got to that level where we're just about beginning to reach above the quagmire, we're suddenly burning the libraries and pulling it all down and destroying the knowledge. And this is the history of humanity. But the thing is, I'm an optimist. I don't believe that human beings are wired up this way. I believe that human beings are intrinsically good. And I also think that in terms of the alternative community, ourselves, we need to set an example. We have to be morally upstanding. We have to try and be impeccable in how we conduct ourselves, how we interact with individuals, and we need to try and set an example so that people can look up to us, not in a high and mighty way, but in a way in which they say, well, you know what, if this individual can research this and be this type of person, then maybe I can do that. Maybe I can talk about this subject with my mother, with my grandma, with my colleague. And so that's what we need to do. We need to try and be the best. And I know it sounds very cliched, but we do need to be the best version of ourselves. And this is what we need to aspire to. We need to try and improve ourselves. We need to try and get to the best person that we can be, the best at our game, and the best human being, and the best what humanity can offer as well. And that's what I found wonderful about your work. I found it very inspiring. I found it very refreshing. I found your books very intelligent, but also intuitive, that there was this combination of the intuitive, but also astute, and the combination of the two. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking this time to spend to talk about your ideas. And I think that your ideas will have helped many people. So I really want to thank you again for your time, Philip. Thank you.
Pierre, thank you so much. And I'm very honoured, but at the same token, as a research to another researcher, I also admire your work. And I agree with you when you say that everyone is brilliant. Unfortunately, the system that we work gives us little choice. We have to find our own way and fight forward for what is truth. Yeah. And I believe that we are capable of just that, because in each and every one of us there is that God spark of consciousness that is fire. And my goodness, can we set things alight with what's up here? So I'm very honoured to have come on your show. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for your time. That was wonderful. Thank you.